Governor. Hi, Jeff.
Good morning.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
See?
Well,
Not only that,
almost.
but... All right. How goes the race? Since last time you were here, Matt Dean stepped out of the race.
Yes.
And is
must have
backing
made
you.
life easier.
What's that?
And is backing you.
And is backing me.
I
Yeah.
thought you said he was back in.
That's what I thought he
was
said
like,
too.
Breaking
Probably
news.
should have covered
You
that.
just ruined my night. So
Morning.
it's going. Sorry, it's going about as well as any race I've ever been in. January was great because after the first, there were just a lot of activists that we've been working on who decided it's time to make a decision, and people were coming on board. And then last week, Matt just shocked me and everybody else, dropped out of the race, threw his support behind me, and it's just the momentum is tremendous right now.
So how did that happen?
Why did that happen?
You know,
He was winning. Sorry, Jeff.
If you were as surprised as the Capitol Press Corps was,
Yeah.
to the point where the show tweeted this out and nobody believed it of our show's
Yeah.
followers until I also retweeted a bunch of the actual video from the press
Wait,
conference.
so our listeners don't believe us, but they believe the lamestream media?
But we didn't have a camera
Thanks,
there.
listeners.
And one of the media actually tweeted out that Matt dropped out and was supporting Keith Downey. I don't
That
know
was
if you saw
that was Pat Kessler.
Pat Kessler.
I
It was
called
just
him
an
out on that.
accident.
Nice
But-
work, man.
No, it was. Actually, this is so Matt. I don't know how well you guys know Matt, but this is exactly him. So we were driving up to Duluth, both of us separately, for the same event last.
Wait, this whole campaign was like a really dry joke?
No, it's real.
That's what I know about Matt.
It's a long con, yeah.
We were
It's funny.
driving up, and he called me in the car, and I couldn't pick up because I was on the phone. He said, "Hey, this is Matt. Just give me a call when you get a chance. I'd love to talk to you about something." So it was like an hour later before I got to him, and I called him up, and we were joking around and making small talk and this and that, and he said, "You know, what if at some point in this campaign I decided to drop out? Would you want my support, or would you rather I just stay neutral?"
That's an awkward conversation, huh?
I said,
Jeez,
well,
Matt.
you know, I'd love your support. Are you really thinking about that? And he said, yeah, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I'm having a press conference. Can you be there for it?
Wow.
Which is, I mean, that's
Everybody,
Matt. That's just
everybody,
Matt.
hit the back 15 seconds button. You do sound like Matt Dean when you're pretending to be Matt Dean.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a shock
does all the
to me.
And weird because Matt had just won, and we're not going to spend the whole time talking about Matt Dean. I'm sure you're happy to have his support. He's a
I am.
smart guy. He's got good ideas. It certainly helps
didn't-
your campaign.
But I
to
didn't
have Matt
realize
on
that was
board.
Dean's press conference.
What do you mean?
I thought that was your press conference, and he showed up.
Yeah, no, it was his press conference, and I
okay,
showed up.
okay.
It was great, and he and Laura have been fantastic. And he was my main opponent for endorsement, and he thought I was his main opponent for endorsement, and so it just fundamentally changed the race in a really good way for our campaign.
All right, that softball's out of the... We'll do another softball. Fake Facebook pages. What's up with that? I ended up being not at the center, but near the inner ring of that when I posted something on Facebook, and I got people sending me messages saying the exact opposite thing, and it all people I trust, so I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you know, and honestly, I put everything I'm going to say about it out on Facebook a week ago. I wasn't even going to do that, to be honest with you, but then some people were saying, well, Johnson's campaign is playing games, so I felt like we had to. It was stuff that you don't like seeing to go on, but I just don't want to really dwell on it.
There's always in political campaigns. There's always a little bit of mud. There's always a little bit of negative campaigning.
This is just weird.
What is the point? You know, where you say, well, we just have to ignore that kind of stuff, and then at what point does it get to the point where you have to say, well, no, I need to say
Right.
something.
Right.
Background, Ben and I both believe you don't repeat bad news, but there comes a point, and I think we saw this with the Emmer campaign, where we should have said something sooner. It's your name on the ballot. I mean, when do you decide, okay, we'll acknowledge this exists and say something against it?
Right. Well, and that, I mean, so it was a fake Facebook page, Never Trumpers for Johnson, where they were trying to confuse people and turn Trump people against me. And then there was some really vile stuff on there, including a allegation of being a pedophile, which is about as bad as it gets, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yep, that's it.
We'd been messing with this for 2 or 3 months, trying to get Facebook wouldn't shut it down, which is just crazy if you ask me. But we couldn't get it done, and then we found out it was another campaign involved, or someone on another campaign that was involved, and so it's done, and hopefully we don't have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah, the whole thing was weird. Okay, softballs are over. Is Tim Pawlenty getting in? What have you heard?
I have heard that he wants to get in. I've heard that he wants to be governor, but he doesn't necessarily want to run for governor. And so that is a problem.
Get in line. Everybody wants that.
I don't know if he'll get in or
you
not.
can figure out how to get elected to office without running a campaign to get elected.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and you know what? If he
Tina
wants,
Flynn Smith did it.
If he wants
Good
to
point.
get into the race, I have no problem with that. I hope he gets in and actually runs for the endorsement if he does that and abides by the endorsement like everyone else in the race is, because a protracted primary is not going to be good for us, regardless of who our candidate is.
So you have the
And you've already proven how that works out.
Well, it hurts. Yeah, it really does. We're already in a little bit of a hole in Minnesota as Republicans, so fighting each other all summer is not helpful.
Well, and that's what I'd like to ask about. We have the caucuses coming up here next Tuesday. Fundraising information has been disclosed from all the campaigns for the entirety of 2017. You lead all Republicans in fundraising, but come in sixth if you throw the Democrat candidates for governor as well. Is there a in fundraising, is there this idea, because the Pawlenty possibility is lingering over this race, that money is waiting until he makes a decision?
Yes, some of it is.
Okay.
That's not all of it, though, because this happens almost every single cycle. For whatever reason, the large giving class of Republicans in Minnesota don't like to give their money to more than one candidate, and it's because they're conservative, I guess, and they tend to wait until we have one candidate, and it's frustrating as hell, and it happens year after cycle, and the Democrats, they give to everybody, and they give it early, and for whatever reason, that is a difference, and I think it's just, philosophy about being careful with money. And so this was, it didn't come as a shock to me, although I'll admit I was a little surprised by the total haul of Walz and Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
But
But
if you look at what they've spent, and I know it's a little nuanced, but it's really important. We've all agreed to spending limits. You can't get out of those once you agree to them.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose you can, but there's a huge fine of some sort. And so we all have to stick to our spending limits. I've spent $120,000. Walz has spent $600,000, and Coleman has spent $500,000. That is all going toward that. I'm going to actually have if they keep this up, I will have a funding advantage next September and October.
Mark this and delete it from the podcast that gets released. Do they know this? And what is that limit?
The limit, it's different because if they have a contested primary, they get to spend more, and they're going to have a contested primary. So my limit will be $3.6 million. Their limit will be 4.7 something. They'll spend that extra $1 million on their primary. There's no question about that. So we'll be about the same. They might have a little advantage. But if they spend $1 million of it raising this money, and I spend $300,000, it's actually going to inure to our benefit. The problem is, in the meantime, you get all this talk about how Republicans can't raise money and there's no excitement. That's a little frustrating. But if you're willing to look past that to the long term, they're putting themselves in a really bad spot.
What do you get when you spend $600,000 in the year before the election year?
Lots of consultants and fundraisers.
All right.
Yeah. Ben, we're the only people who've worked in politics for as long as we have in a hotbed state, battleground, not making any money. That's
Everyone
us.
else is making money. We don't know how to make any of the money.
I looked up a thing. You sent me a thing about how podcast advertising is working,
Yeah,
all the money being spent on podcast advertising. We're a Venn diagram of all the success. Ben and I are just writing the little part there, not nothing.
Hey, can I add one thing?
So we'll teach you everything we can. We've learned, which will take.
Can you wait till after
How to put a lawn
caucuses,
sign
and then
up
we
so it
can
won't
sit
fall
down and
down.
talk
Yeah.
about it? What, can I just add one thing about the fundraising? Because
Yes.
sometimes lost in all this is, well, let's compare Walz to Johnson or whatever. But right now, for me, with a caucus and an endorsement coming, the comparison is with other Republicans, and we didn't just do better. I more than doubled up the person in second place, and we have 3.5 times the cash on hand of any other Republican in the race. And money isn't everything in politics, but it's really important. Yeah. And if we can't raise the money and you don't have name recognition as a starting point, it's going to be hard to win.
Yeah, I hate the criticism of money in politics, I think people sometimes think that like candidates raise that money and just buy chocolate with it. No, that's to get what you believe out to people.
Right.
That's how you do it. You write it on the back of dollar bills, and then you spend that money on chocolate.
You forgot that on the Emmer campaign. We gave delegates chocolate.
Well, at that part, you can do that. What else? What do you hear? Are you talking to? I guess it's mostly a lot of all your stuff now is talking to people who lean our way.
Mostly.
They're going to be delegates or not.
We try to. So I travel. Most of my time is spent on delegate calls and fundraising, but usually when we travel to a BPOU, a county convention of some sort to talk, or not convention, but meeting to talk to Republican activists, we try to schedule something else along the way that is more geared towards the general election. And so I'm doing a little bit of both, and I think that's important for activists right now. The economy, jobs, government spending, taxes, no surprises whatsoever. Healthcare comes up a lot. And for the general public, it's jobs and healthcare and not much else. The immigration issue, depending upon where you are, certainly is an interesting issue for everybody, refugee resettlement. But that's not true throughout the state. It's just in pockets of the state.
St. Cloud,
Worthington, there's a few other spots, but St. Cloud more than anywhere else.
Where do you put, for messaging or campaigning, where do you put MNLARS? It is not what could be the end of the world, end of your life, like healthcare is, like the MNsure problem, but it sure is expensive and it sure is inconveniencing people.
Especially after what happened with MNsure. It's a really powerful message, and it fits in with my broader message. I mean, my overall message is that government, especially government agencies, have become arrogant, and they really don't care about how what they do affects actual people. And so their belief is our job is to instruct people and direct people and help them make better decisions about their lives as opposed to serve them.
This government reminds me of, my wife and I have to keep having kids. I always have a toddler to reference. Reminds me of a conversation I had with my son last week when I told him that he had put his pants on backwards, which he had. Because the zipper goes in front. We all know that. And his response was that I was wrong, and he was very haughty about it. Like, you don't get to be arrogant. You're wrong. You're wrong.
Are you sure that he just hadn't dabbled in the band Crisscross?
This is a long line of accidents involving your pants. Where do you get the arrogance from? And that's government. Apparently, at least the technology end of government in this state is, we screwed that thing up, and we're going to screw this thing up.
Well, and by the way, it's not just MNsure and MNLARS. There's a government, there's a computer program called METS that every county in the state uses to determine eligibility for welfare, because that all goes through the counties. That was remade 2 or 3 years ago, and it continues to be such a disaster that most of our welfare workers in Hennepin County are now doing it all on paper. So we have literally returned to the 1960s because the computer program continues to just be a complete disaster.
Match their trains.
So with MNsure, it was a little. It felt like it was a little easier to explain to voters because healthcare was so important. Is there going to be a difficulty in expressing the fact that 9 years, $93 million, they want $43 million more? Except this time it's about vehicle licensing and registration.
I don't think it is because, as Jack said, this is not a life or death situation, but it certainly is. It's certainly affecting people very personally. And the longer this lasts, the more people it's going to affect because they've got to spend 2 hours standing in line to get to the end of the line and find out that they can't get what they want because government's incompetent. And I think that's a pretty powerful message for people.
Have you noticed anything different about running this time versus 4 years ago? Has Minnesota changed at all?
Yeah, I noticed a dramatic change starting at the state fair this summer, and I think that's a good measure because you get every corner of the state, and it's not just a bunch of Republicans you're meeting with. It's pretty much everybody who stops by. There's absolutely much more of an interest in changing things than there was in 2014, without question. People are very open to listening to a Republican, even if they don't generally vote Republican, because they're kind of tired of this attitude in government. They're tired of the incompetence that has become more obvious. They're a little more concerned about the economy and where the state is going jobs-wise than they were 4 years ago. And so and amongst Republicans, I see an optimism that clearly wasn't there 4 years ago, partly because of Trump almost winning, partly because we have the House and the Senate, partly because it's an open seat.
You've mentioned jobs a few times. In what way? Like with the unemployment rate so low? Like, what do you mean when you say jobs?
Well, there are a lot of people in this state who are working. Our unemployment rate is relatively low, although it's higher than every single state that surrounds us, including the evil Wisconsin. And there are a lot of people who are working, but they're not working in a job that they feel meets their needs, or maybe they're working in two jobs because they can't find a middle class job.
It has been 10 years since the subprime mortgage crisis, and I noticed that the people that worked the drive-through, they were no longer teenagers. They were men and women in their 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. And there was just constant evidence of people that had jobs, but they weren't the careers they used to have. That it wasn't what they were studying for.
Yep, that's
it's 10
the exact
years later,
problem.
And we still have that.
Yeah, and the private sector in Minnesota is not creating what I would call middle-class jobs where you can provide for your family. We are creating jobs, but they tend to be low-skill, low-wage jobs, at least when you compare to other like states. Their middle class and higher class jobs are being created at a much faster rate than ours, and it's because we're hostile to entrepreneurs. It's pretty simple.
If you can't make a career, you can't make a middle class lifestyle off of volunteering for the Super Bowl.
Kind of a moron.
Only for 2
free
weeks.
Socks.
Leah is
I got more than
Super
just
Bowl
socks.
volunteer.
You got
Also
a
a
cool.
scarf.
You got a cool coat too, didn't? And a backpack.
Yeah, it's right over there. And the backpack.
Yeah.
That's what we're charging you to be on this show. I got a cool coat and a new backpack.
Yeah, am I getting paid for that?
You get the same as Old Man Paper gets.
Oh, okay, great.
If you become governor, what will you do to attract business? We have the story of...
This question is for Jeff, by the way.
Foxconn in Wisconsin, where initially it was like, they're getting a big manufacturing thing there. They're going to give them $3 billion to do that? That can't be good. If you're governor, what are you going to do to get manufacturing jobs, middle-class jobs, high-class jobs, podcast empires?
It will not be that method of saying we're going to be hostile to everybody, except once in a while we're going to give someone a special deal so we can cut a ribbon and have a press conference.
So we dodged a bullet with Amazon?
It depends on what they offered, but I suspect in order to get Amazon with our current... culture right now, our climate right now,
Amazon Kermits.
We would have had to give them a hell of a special deal, and so I wouldn't have done that. But it again, not rocket science. We overregulate, our taxes are too high, and we permit at the speed of government rather than business. And all of those things can be fixed. And once you do that, you start attracting entrepreneurs, not just because we have better people here and nicer lakes, but because it also makes business sense for them.
What can you do in your administration, if elected governor, to not have any more? I asked this during the cage match. Any more expensive technological disasters?
Hold people accountable.
Wait, what? Now I got to write that down.
When I look at the fact that what has happened with Minlars, and now they're asking for more money, and it doesn't appear like anybody's paying any consequence for that. That's insane. And so, number one, if the private sector can do it better, that is the starting point. If we believe that for whatever reason we can do it as well inside of government, which I often doubt, then hold people accountable and don't roll something out until you are certain that it's actually going to work.
I wish you'd won the governor's office last time.
What changes after caucus night? Does your campaign turn into a different phase,
yes,
or is it all sort of similar? Because for the longest time, all this pre-election, after caucus night, it actually feels like, okay, we can actually properly run for something, yes, because we know who to talk to now. The people who want to be delegates have chosen to become delegates.
So I think there are 4 phases to the campaign, and we are going to finish the first one on Tuesday night. So this first 9-10 months has been phase one, but now
unless the Eagles win, and then they're going to delay the caucus night a week.
But on caucus night
reasons.
or the morning after, we're going to start getting names of who is going to the conventions, and then phase two is all about organization. There was some organization now in trying to get your people to caucus, but now it's get your people from caucus through the convention to the state convention. And then after the convention through primary is phase three. Hopefully we won't have one, but they will, so it'll still be a different phase, and then it's the general to finish it up.
Well, and for you, the candidate, there are going to be BPOU conventions littered around the state, and there's going to be an effort to try to get you to as many of those on the Saturdays that they're being held. Sometimes there's like trying to beat the record of like 12 or 13 in one day.
Do you like sleeping and eating right?
Do I?
Because those days are over.
I know. Yeah, I know. I've been through it once before. Yeah, and you're right. We all have Saturdays with 20 to choose from or 25 to choose from,
Right.
and you just got to figure out how, the biggest ones you can get to and as many as possible over the course of 3 or 4 hours.
For
before they
everybody
adjourn.
but you, for everybody but the candidate, it's fun.
Yeah, right.
It's fun. It's exciting. It's challenging. It's important. It's neat. Sucks for the candidate.
I
The
think
rest
it's-
of us, great.
It's kind of fun. I
Cool.
think it's fun, and there's an end. It lasts a few weeks, and then you move on to a different phase of the campaign. So it's all right.
All right.
At what point is the parade phase of the campaign?
Oh, that also starts fun. Does not end fun.
Yeah, I'm not a huge
End of
parade
May.
fan. Yeah, it
End
is.
of
It'll,
May.
for us, it'll be. I'm not going to do parades until after the endorsement. So
Okay.
June 3rd is when parades will start. And I didn't do a ton of them last time because we had a primary, and parades aren't a real efficient way to get to Republican primary voters. But if we don't have a primary, I'll probably be in a ton of parades.
What you want to do is you want to get, and it's still January. Yeah, you got time. Oh,
It's
February.
It's February now.
Ooh,
It's,
it might be too
it's
late.
February 2nd.
It's the morning of February 2nd.
You
That's
need
right.
to. Very good. It feels like we've done this before. You need to get at the beginning of the Forest Lake 4th of July parade and the
Yes.
end of the Delano
Yep.
4th of July.
I have done
just
that.
make it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've done that. There's
God, I'm
strategy
so
involved.
Done. I'm happy I'm done campaigning. All right. Which website?
JohnsonForGovernor.org.
JohnsonForGovernor.org. Anything else you want to leave with our listeners?
Please go to caucus. I don't care who you're supporting. Go to caucus next Tuesday night. It's if you haven't done it before, it's actually kind of fun. And we have a unique system in Minnesota where the grassroots actually get to make this decision. So show up at 7 o'clock. You can find your caucus site on our website if you're interested.
All right, we're going to be talking about Caucus Night with the guys from Community Solutions. Caucus Night, unique to Minnesota. It's like a Juicy Lucy, but for freedom.
Whether it's snow, rain, humidity, or the invasion of just too many screens, are you looking for a fun new place to take the kids to get out of the house? Come check out the new indoor